Hi there, Valerie. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today and to the readers of Richard Rohr's Daily Meditations. You're someone who we've quoted a lot, sharing from your Sikh tradition and wisdom. And so some of the readers might be familiar with your work, and I want to thank you for taking the time today.
I am so grateful to be here with you, Mark, and really with all of you. I feel such kinship to the community that has gathered around this wisdom that you put out every single day. And for my words or my traditions, wisdom to be part of that is such a great honor.
You have just, or you're about to release, as we're speaking, a book called Sage Warrior. So I wanted to begin and ask you, what is a sage warrior?
Yes. Well, it just arrived. Can I show you?
Oh, please do.
This
Yes.
is the book. This is the book, and um, it's dedicated to my grandfather, to Papaji. He was my first sage warrior. He was the one who showed me what it meant to cultivate a life of inner wisdom for enormous, courageous action in the world. I hadn't thought about my grandfather's wisdom in a really long time. I have spent almost 20 years as an activist in the trenches, fighting for racial justice, social justice in this country. And it was only the last 8 years since the 2016 election season, hate crimes skyrocketing, the rise of demagogues on the soil and abroad, climate disasters befalling us daily, assaults on women's bodies, on queer bodies, on trans bodies, on my own people in harm's way. And I'm a mother, and having to reckon with the fact that my small children are growing up in a country less safe for them than it was for me. So I hit a crisis when I became a mama and saw the state of the world. And I knew that I had to go deeper. I had to go deeper than I'd ever had before in order to figure out how I could still be showing up with courage every day. And I went back. The last few years, I've been on this profound journey going back to my ancestors, going back to the stories that my grandfather would tell me as a child. Our ancestors, the first Sikhs, were mystics, poets, musicians. They sang a song of love and oneness and began a liberation experiment in 15th, 16th century South Asia, where they practiced what they sang. It was an anti-caste, bold liberation experiment. And like all such liberation experiments through history, I think of the Gnostics, the Cathars, they challenged those who ruled by power, conquest, cruelty, control. And it was only a matter of time before what was then the Mughal Empire came after our ancestors. They might have been annihilated from the face of the planet. They might not have survived. I might not be here, except for something very surprising happening in the course of human history. A community of mystics pick up the sword. Farmers, householders, musicians, poets, they resist empire. They become warriors. They become sage warriors, the Sant Sipahi. And we survived. I've been thinking a lot now about the kind of courage that we need. We have many more tools for nonviolent resistance. But what is that formula of cultivating enough inner wisdom, inner freedom to be able to fight for it out in the world? What if this formula of becoming a sage in order to become a warrior in the world is exactly the medicine that we need right now? And so I've been returning to my ancestors' wisdom and pulling forth the medicine I think we all might need in order to be brave with our lives. The sage loves, the warrior fights. It's a path of what I call revolutionary love. And it's a path I believe that we are all called to walk in our own way now.
Thank you for marrying those two, the wisdom path and the warrior path, and articulating a path to understand and apply that today. How do we hold the fighting of the warrior with the wisdom of the sage in a way that does not replicate the divisions and the polarities and the violences that are so prevalent today?
Well, it all begins with the sage. That's very important. It all begins centering on love. My grandfather taught me to pursue a life of revolutionary love is to walk boldly into the hot winds of the world with the eyes of a sage and the heart of a warrior. So what does it mean to see the world through the eyes of a sage. Guru Nanak, the first teacher in the Sikh faith, sang a song of Ik Onkar, of oneness ever unfolding. That I am part of the one, you are part of the one, there's nothing outside the one. I mean, you're nodding because we know this truth. It's the mystical heart of all the great wisdom traditions that we belong to one another. And so we can look upon the face of anyone or anything around us and say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. But Guru Nanak taught that it wasn't enough to know this truth or even to sing this truth. You can't get lost in the clouds in the truth. And so many traditions back in that era were about an ascetic life, about sequestering yourself away in order to merge with this truth. He said, no, come back to your fields, till your farms, raise your children, serve, sweat, sing, practice what you sing. And if you see all others as a part of you, if you see sister, brother, sibling, grandparent, my beloved child, that is actually, my grandfather used to say, love is dangerous business. Love is dangerous business, because if I see you as a part of me, then if you are suffering, I must be willing to risk myself for you as if you are my own beloved kid. I must be willing, if needed, to fight for you. And so the warrior path developed as a way to practice what we sang. Guru Nanak sang, higher than truth is the living of truth. You can't have the sage without the warrior. You can't have the breathe without the push. You can't have the love without the revolution. And I feel like we've lived in a culture that has bifurcated those, and how our industries have developed, how our traditions have developed. And so what does it mean to return to a kind of wholeness where the way that we love informs what we do in the world, and what we do in the world deepens our love? Mark, we're faced with so many crises right now. Every day, a fresh calamity befalls us. I mean, some days are so deadly, I feel like I can taste the ash in my mouth. And that's when I need to remember the medicine. That as alone as I feel in those moments of severe trauma and devastation, that if I can lift my gaze and reach out for community, I see other people who have no obvious reason to love one another coming together to grieve, to care for each other, to organize, to rise up, to make a plan to do the thing together. And so that sage wisdom is a channel for connection. And that connection is the precondition for any kind of labor, activism, or service, or just showing up where we are for our babies, our children, our communities. For any kind of action to last, it has to come from that place of hearts connected that profoundly, that deeply. That's what our ancestors taught us.
And your book, Sage Warrior, is so beautifully put together, each chapter telling a story of one of the elders in the Sikh faith tradition, and then sharing your own travelogue of following in their footsteps, where they lived, where they worshipped, where they sang, where they farmed. And the first guru that you mentioned, Guru Nanak, he said, there is no Muslim, no Hindu. I wanted to ask you, what does he mean by that? Because I think there's a kinship with the vision of Richard Rohr and of the oneness of the mystical tradition. He would call it unitive consciousness, and what Guru Nanak might be saying about there is no Muslim, no Hindu. What does he mean by that?
Oh, I see Richard as a sage elder of our time. And he is lifting up for us the wisdom that is the heartbeat of all the great wisdom traditions in the world. And Guru Nanak's revelation around oneness emerges in the context of a story. The story goes that every morning, a man named Nanak sat by a river and meditated on the world and took the pain of the world into his heart until it crescendoed inside of him. And one morning, he did not return from the river. People thought him a dead man, a drowned man. The sun rose and the sun fell. The sun rose and the sun fell. On the third day, a figure was spotted, seated in a cemetery covered in ash. It was Nanak, but not Nanak. He had been rebirthed in those waters. And his first utterance was, Na ko Hindu, na ko Musalman. There is no Hindu. There is no Muslim. This was more than treat your neighbor as you would yourself. This was more than take in the stranger. This was There is no stranger. There is no you against me at all. That we constitute each other. We are part of one another. That we can look upon the face of anyone and say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. And Guru Nanak did not issue commandments or lecture or even tell stories about this truth. He said it's not just an idea to hold, it's an experience that must resound in your whole body. He began to sing songs of love with music, with poetry, so that you could have the experience that he had when he realized, when he felt, when he tasted the truth of our oneness. And so the invitation for all of us is to think of those moments of vismad, of wonder, when we get lost in the swell of music or we're looking into the eyes of our beloved child. Those moments are not throwaway moments. They're not incidental. Those ordinary moments of wonder where the line between you and me starts to blur, they are insights into the sacred nature of things. And so if we can hold on to that taste and then take the information and energy released in that experience, that mystical taste of oneness into what we do, that's the bridge. That's the bridge between the sage revelation and the warrior practice, roll up sleeves. How will I labor with love? Knowing this, feeling this in my body, how will I show up for you?
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And for many of the readers of the daily meditations, we won't be very familiar with the Sikh tradition. And I found your book, and just speaking as someone who did not know much about Sikhism, I found it such an accessible, enlivening, inspiring entryway. So I wanted to ask, what are you hoping for people who are unfamiliar with the Sikh tradition to take away from this book?
Oh, to find yourself in it. To find the universal in the particular, to get still enough, go slow enough to enter an immersive story, an epic, imaginative retelling of the first 250 years of Sikh history is an invitation to lose yourself in a story in order to find yourself in it. And the reason I'm so excited to make this invitation is because, Mark, you and I went to divinity school together at Harvard, and you can go from elementary school to high school to college to divinity school and not ever encounter a single course on the Sikh faith or Sikh wisdom. It is one of the world's greatest world religions, 500,000 Sikhs in the United States, 23 million worldwide. And yet we're only known insofar as people hear about our struggles and our suffering. I mean, we've been the subject of enormous racial violence since September 11th. That's why so much of my storytelling has been centered around my people's pain. It's only when the world started to feel so apocalyptic that I went back and said, what if it's not my people's pain necessarily that everyone needs to hear, although that needs to be acknowledged? What if my ancestors had wisdom that is precisely the medicine that we all need now? From a fresh source, a source that might be new for a lot of people, and a source that invites them to unlock new understandings, new connections inside of them. I think we can all become Sant Sipahi. I think we can all become sage warriors. We can all walk this path. And you don't need to become a Sikh. That's the other thing about our faith. We do not proselytize. Sikhs do not proselytize. Guru Nanak believed that all paths walked with integrity lead to the same revelation of love. And so if you are searching, if you are hungry for new sources of spiritual nourishment to connect you to the heart of life, the truth of life, the love at the center of life, and the power of love to unlock revolutionary social change. I mean, this is mysticism that inspires revolutionary social change. Then Sage Warrior is the book that I want to put in your hands.
One of the revelations of love that I had when I was reading it was when you talked about developing a sovereign place within that provides strength amid suffering. And I found that really resonant with the Christian contemplative call to contemplation and finding that place within that is actually not separate from all the places without. So I wanted to ask, what is that sovereign place? Could you share with readers what that is and how that can be such a source of strength?
Finding a sovereign space inside of me, a space of freedom and beauty and safety and wonder, a place of pleasure, a place of joy, finding that sovereign space inside of me took me a long time. It was through decades of working as an activist, being in such close proximity to pain, to trauma, to violence, that I realized that the world around you, the ecology around you, starts to mirror the ecology inside of you. Inside my own mind, there was always a room where a mass shooting was happening. Inside my own mind, there's always a place where a genocidal campaign is unfolding. Inside my own mind, I carry inside of me the images and the stories of suffering that I see around me. And it was in the wake of the massacre at the Oak Creek Sikh Gurdwara in 2012, when a white nationalist committed a mass shooting that was the greatest act of violence that my people have experienced on the soil. That was the moment when I saw my elders say, no, FBI, you will not repair this space. We will repair it. And I saw my elders turn on the song prayers of our ancestors and roll up their sleeves. They themselves pulled out the blood-soaked carpets. They themselves repaired the broken glass. They themselves restored the sovereign space of our people, a place of music and freedom and revelation that is our Gurdwara. It is our sacred space. And as they were doing it, I could feel that repair happening inside of me, inside of them. And I thought the only way to fully embrace sacred spaces around us is if we are also creating that space within us. And what if we could carry that space inside of us wherever we are, even if I'm thrown behind prison bars, even if I'm at the next hate crime, seeing the blood still fresh on the ground, even if my daughter is wailing through the night from a fever I cannot solve, I could feel all of that noise and terror and chaos inside of me. But what if, when I'm in my moments of great pain and I don't know how to show up, what if there is a space inside of me where I can rest that is just as sovereign as that Gurdwara? What if? And so, Mark, I started to imagine it. I started to build physically, like imagining building a sovereign space inside of me. And it took me a moment to realize that it mirrored the architectural visions of my ancestors. It's plated in gold. There's gold on the ceilings and gold on the walls and gold on the ground, but then I miss trees. And so there are trees, little luminous cacao pods, and there's a river that runs through it, and there's bird song, and there's always a cup of hot chocolate waiting for me. I'm like literally visually built this space inside of me where now the more that I visit it, the more I can go there to rest. And the more that I practice resting in that sovereign space every week, I have like, this is sovereign time. I close my eyes, I go to that space. I see what I discover, what new beauties can unfold inside of me, what new pleasures. And then because I've built that space and reified it in my mind, the next time there is a racial slur, or the next time I see a moment of terror on the street or on the screen, I know that I can take a breath and there it is. I can rest in it. I can breathe in it for just a moment. It's not a place of escape. It's a place of respite where you can gain the information and energy that you might need and the insight that you might need in order to respond. I'm tired of reacting to the world forever from the wound inside of me, from the trauma inside of me. I've worked that way. I've lived that way for a very long time in my life. And I thought I had to work from the wound, work from the trauma, respond from there in order to be effective. I find now that I am far more effective. And if I'm resting in a sovereign space inside of me where I can hear my deepest wisdom. And from this place of wisdom and love and possibility, let there be space. Let there be space. And then I can respond. And when I respond now, I'm responding from a place that is imagining the world as it can be instead of just what I'm fighting against. I'm infusing my words with that love and with that possibility instead of that fear and that trauma. I am presaging the world to come and how I respond. I'm becoming it as I respond when I do it from that sovereign space within me. And so, yes, this is not a traditional Sikh practice, but it is inspired by my faith. And it's one of the meditations that I invite us as a tool in your toolkit. Your space might be a visual one. It might be a musical one. It might be something altogether new. But I think that's how our wisest ancestors survived apocalypse, is that they practiced freedom inside of them in a world that told them that they weren't. And that way oppression could not crush them, even if it took their lives, even if it meant colonization and genocide, even if, as long as they were practicing freedom inside of them, they were able to pass that on so that the next generation could live into it, could labor into that truth. A little bit more, a little bit more. Can we love a little bit more? Can we become a little bit more? Can we become more free? It starts from the inside out.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing a glimpse of what your sovereign space looks like, and inspiring us to. So I've got this fly that's bugging me, but inspiring us to do the same in our own context, in our own lives.
Well, can I ask you?
Oh yeah, please go ahead.
Can I ask
oh yeah,
you?
go
As
ahead.
you have how symbolic, right? The fly is buzzing. There's always going to be something buzzing, and yet when I was speaking or when you were reading, what does the sovereign space in you look like?
You know, I try to get up before the kids get up, and I sit in that chair over there, and maybe I can. This might bug Corey, but you can see my grandmother's blanket that she made for me, or not for me, but she made that, and it was passed down. And yeah, I just sit there, and honestly, my sovereign space I got to clear out a lot of cobwebs before I actually get there. So I'm talking to God about what I'm worried about, and then it's just a warm embrace. It's a warm blanket. It's a cup of tea. And lately I'm remembering my grandmother, and she would make us a hot beverage and play Scrabble, and just give us unconditional love. And so it's that space of just being loved. And yeah, and I appreciate you inviting us to remember our ancestors in that way, and that connects to me in that way too.
That is so beautiful, Mark. I find that it's easier to hear the voices of my ancestors when I rest in that sovereign space in me. That, then I can hear what my grandfather would have said, and then he's saying it now. There's really little difference when you imagine them get still. This time is calling each of us to be more brave than we ever have before. And I find that I can only do it resting in the sovereign space inside of me and calling my bravest ancestors to my back. And the fact that you actually have something physical like your grandmother's blanket as a tool to get there, to go there, well, that's very efficient. That's very
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and in this conversation, we're holding the wisdom of the sage and the fighting ferocity of the warrior. And so I have a question that's more on the warrior side. You talk about divine rage, and I just found that really interesting how you put those words together. And so what is divine rage, and how does it lead us to solidarity with those who are suffering? And even as you describe, love for our enemy, how does divine rage hold that sage warriorhood together?
Well, first, how many of us have been taught to suppress our rage in the name of love? I had to learn the hard way as a woman of color, as South Asian woman, but the more that I suppressed my rage in order to be good or spiritual or polite or lovable, the more I suppressed my rage, the more I got ill. The solution is not to suppress our rage or to let it explode. We only have to look at the headlines to see what world that creates. The solution is not to suppress it or to let it explode, but to process it in safe containers, to honor our rage, to even dance with our rage, the way that Black visionary Audre Lorde described. So many of our ancestors knew this. They created spaces for drumming and dancing and singing and shaking, and right, you have to move it with your body and often move it with community. And when you move that energy, you can ask yourself, what information does my rage carry? What does it say about what's important to me? And how do I wish to harness this energy for what I do in the world? I call that harnessed energy divine rage. The aim of divine rage is not vengeance. It is to reorder the world. And now we get to ask ourselves, well, what is my role? What do I wish to do? And some of us, and this is very important, some of us need to stay holding safe containers for rage for ourselves and others, especially when the hostility or the hate or the violence is ongoing. to be able to tend to our grief, to be able to process our rage so that it does not consume us whole is vital, vital work. Some of us might be safe enough or brave enough to get to that next practice around listening to our opponents, wondering about our opponents, wondering about the wound in them. And anytime, I can't go there immediately, right? I have to honor my rage first. And sometimes it takes a few minutes, sometimes it takes years, depending on what the calamity was. But there will inevitably become a moment where I feel safe enough, brave enough to start to wonder why. Why did they hurt me? Why did they believe that? Why did they do that? Why? And once I have enough spaciousness inside of me to wonder why, then that is information for me that I might be able to engage my opponent. Now, this is very important. If you have a knee on your neck, it is not necessarily your role to look up at your opponent or wonder about them or engage them. Your role is to stay alive, to take the next breath. That's your revolutionary act. But if you are someone who is safe enough, brave enough to reach out to those kinds of opponents, we need you now. We are having this conversation in an election season where there are a lot of opponents. And what I want to remind us all is that as much as we must fight for our convictions and stand for what is just, remember that all those people who vote against you are not disappearing after Election Day or Inauguration Day. We have to find a way to live together still. The only way we will birth a multiracial democracy is if we hold up a vision of a future that leaves no one behind, not even our worst opponents. And so you might be in the position to have that conversation with the neighbor down the street, or the uncle at the family table, or the teenager who doesn't want to vote because she's too cynical. What might happen if you leave them alone? Hannah Arendt says isolation breeds radicalization, right? Our algorithms are but you might be the person to puncture the algorithm, to sit in those spaces of deep listening. And deep listening is an act of surrender. You risk being changed by what you hear. We don't see those spaces modeled in the world around us. We have to create them in the spaces between us. And oftentimes it means listening over time, being in relationship. And you know what, Mark? Human beings mirror each other. So if you come out daggers out, they'll come out daggers out. But if you come out and you really wonder why, beneath the slogans and the sound bites, you'll hear the person's story and you'll see their wound. You'll see their grief. You'll see their rage. You might not agree with it, but I've come to understand that there are no such thing as monsters in this world, only human beings who are wounded, who act out of their fear or insecurity or rage. That does not make them any less dangerous, but once we see their wound, they lose their power over us. And we get to ask ourselves, how do we want to take that information into what we do next? And so I invite people to take into account their wounds, their opponents' wounds, into spaces of reimagination, of imagining an outcome, a policy, a relationship that leaves no one outside of our circle of care, not even them. This kind of labor, this kind of revolutionary love, it's not the sacrifice of an individual, it's a practice of a community. And so when we invite people to practice revolutionary love, we always ask, what is your role in this season of your life? What is your role? Is it to create safe containers for rage? Is it to be brave with grief? Is it to engage in listening to opponents? Whatever you choose, it can be a vital practice of love, of revolutionary love. And if all of us are playing our role, not more, not less, then together we're creating the culture shift that we so desperately need.
Thanks for that inspirational word. I'm hearing what you're talking about through the lens of our daily meditations theme. It's radical resilience this year. And I hear much of what you're calling us to is a radical resilience of the heart and the body, of the individual and the collective. So I wanted to put that question back to you. What does it mean? What does radical resilience mean for you when we put those two words together?
Yeah, it's something that I wish I knew much earlier in my life. I thought resilience meant being strong enough to push all the way and stay in the push in order to create the march and fight for the policy and free the people. And My life as an activist was all around pushing my body into the ground. I was always comparing my suffering to those who I was serving. And so, of course, I was never worthy enough to love. I thought I was only as effective as how much I produced and how quickly. And of course, I burnt out. Of course, there was a moment when the little critic in me said, "Oh, you're not strong enough to live in this world." It's because I mistook resilience for working around the clock nonstop. I am so grateful that I had a community to catch me and give me a container in which I could start to heal and realize what I had learned in birthing my children. The wisdom of the midwife. She doesn't say push all the way, my love. She says breathe, then push, and then breathe again. There's a kind of cadence, a kind of rhythm to sustain ourselves in any long labor. The labor of raising a family or running an organization or building a movement, you have to be breathing enough in order to push. And so I learned how to breathe, Mark. In my 40s, I learned how to breathe finally, breathe with music and meditation, with poetry and praise. I mean, that's why these daily meditations is often the deepest breath that we get every day, so that we can discern what our particular push might be. What I've discovered is when there's breathing and pushing every single day, there's enough spaciousness in order to let joy in. Because dropping into the present moment, no matter what's happening in the world, you can look around the room you are in and let your eye fall on the most beautiful thing, this wonderful thing, this amazing plant that is leaning toward the light and growing without me doing anything except forgetting and then remembering to water it once a week, is also just as real as what's happening out there in the world. That too is the sage practice. To drop into the connection and oneness that's beneath the surface every single moment. You just have to get still enough to drop in, to feel it, to be amazed by it, to let that all fill your body. And remember the mystery, the magic, and the pleasure of being alive right here with you through the screen. How are we talking? Thousands of miles apart. How is this the magic of being here right now, right? Give yourself over to it. And then we can roll up our sleeves and do the next thing, right? Make the next push, informed by the deep inner truth of our connection.
Wow. Valarie, thank you so much for inviting us to breathe and to push and to remember that you are a part of me that I do not yet know. What a call! I almost experienced that line as a koan of wisdom to walk through the world with. You are a part of me I do not yet know. Thank you for giving us this teaching and for sharing your time and your wisdom with us through the daily meditations. What a gift.
Can I give you one last little treat then?
Please do, yes.
Those words, here I am saying revolutionary love is the call of our times and create a compass and a framework, and this is the movement, and this is how you... Turns out, I didn't need to teach my children how to love or how to wonder. Here I had to sit down and think I just had to protect what they already knew. And so as I was thinking about protecting my daughter's capacity for wonder and for love, a song sprung up, and it's now a children's book, and it's that refrain, Mark. It's that refrain. Yes. Do you want to hear? I can give you a couple of verses.
Yeah, please do. We'd love it. I believe, and can tell us the title of the book too.
And here it is. So the big spiritual wisdom book is called Sage Warrior, but the children's book is called World of Wonder, and it comes with an early childhood learning hub for parents and educators to practice revolutionary love with their children. But it actually is all quite simple. So the song goes, I'll give you a few verses. Ants on a leaf, birds in the sky, sweet little bee, tree so high. Wonder baby says, wow, whoa, you're a part of me I don't yet know. And then we do that with in all directions, right? People walk by, faces are new, so many colors, points of view. Where have they been? What have they seen? Their stories show me everything. Wonder Baby says, wow, whoa, you're a part of me I don't yet know. Sad stories make me turn away, but I keep listening, I get brave. I speak, I march, I dance, I sing. Justice is what we can bring. Wonder Baby says, wow, whoa, you're a part of me I don't yet know. So this is it. This is opponents now. We did others. Now we go to opponents. When I see someone being mean, I wonder what's hiding underneath. Find what makes them behave this way. Love can make us very brave. Wonder Baby says, wow, whoa, you're a part of me I don't yet know. And then we turn it to ourselves. When I want to run and hide, holding tears, fire inside, it's hard to wonder about anyone else. So I wonder about myself. And then it happens, like a surprise. The feeling changes before my eyes. Each feeling has a special part in showing me how to love my heart. Wonder Baby says, wow, whoa, when I wonder, my love can grow.
Oh, thank you, Valarie. What a gift. That's amazing. Such a memorable way to befriend ourselves and the world.
That's it.
Thank you.
That's it.
Valarie, for readers who want to find out more and read your book, Sage Warrior, where would they go to find out and have that copy in their hands?
You can get the book at sagewarrior.us, and the book comes with a musical album, so you can read the book, listen to the music, and have the kind of experience in your body, in your heart, and your mind, the way that we did when we were growing up with these stories as children. I'm so excited to put this treasure chest of Sikh wisdom in your hands. And if you wanted the children's book, this is actually a Sikh family who is featured in the book, and it's a call to love for all of our children. You go to ourworldofwonder.org, ourworldofwonder.org, and that's also where you can find all of the incredible learning resources for practicing revolutionary love with children. This is an intergenerational movement that we are building that welcomes everybody, no one outside of our circle of care. So the way that we're building this movement is exactly embodying the world that we want to see.